watching live on video of our meeting. I want to assure you that Murray City is doing all it can to prevent the spread of the COVID-19 virus. We urge you, and you've all heard this before, but I want to go through it again. We urge you to use common sense approach and to prevent illness. Wash your hands frequently, at least 20 seconds. Avoid touching your face. Practice 6 feet social distancing rule with others, and we're doing that here in the chambers. If you have been exposed to someone who's tested positive for the virus, please self-quarantine for 14 days. If you have traveled outside the U.S., depending on the country, you may also need to self-quarantine. China, Iran, and most Europe have widespread risk. If you develop a fever or cough or have difficulty breathing, please contact a healthcare provider for medical advice. And on that, I want to also assure everyone that Murray City has the best first responders, bar none, in the world. Our police and fire are here to serve, and they are serving, and let's do everything we can to keep them safe as well. Now, for the council meeting only, during the meeting, if you want to make comments during the citizen comment period or in one of the public hearings, you may email your comments to jlopez@murray.utah.gov. These comments need to be less than 3 minutes, isn't it?
Yes, 3 minutes.
Yeah, please make them less than 15 minutes. Include your name, your contact information, and they will be read into the record. And with that, we'll start the meeting. Discussion items. First, Utah Telecommunications Open Infrastructure Agency, Utopia, and Utah Infrastructure Agency, UIA update, Brenda Moore.
Yeah, I'm just going to say.
Sorry, I'm in your way.
I'm just going to let the people from UIA and Utopia handle all of the update for today, because they know better what they're doing than I do. All I know is their service stays on and it's fast.
There you go. Thank you.
Well, I couldn't hope for a better introduction than that. Let's see if I can get something on screen here. Just thinking, that's a good sign. All right. Cancel that. Cancel that.
While you're setting that up and I'm thinking about it, I want to welcome Rosalba, Councilwoman Rosalba Dominguez. She's on the phone today.
Welcome, Rosalba.
At least I hope she's on the phone.
Rosalba.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
here. Can you
Okay.
guys hear me?
Yep.
We got you.
Great.
I cannot seem how to get rid of that menu. Sorry about this. My mouse, oh, there we go. That's good. All right. So anyways, I thought let's do a quick introduction here, and then I wanted to cover some of the history. Some of you are new on the council and wanted to provide some context for Utopia. First introduction, so I'm Roger Timmerman. I'm the executive director at Utopia, and Josh Chandler is our legal counsel. And we stole him from Sandy City just a little over a year ago, is that right? And then Laurie Harvey, she's our CFO, and we stole her from Midvale City. So they
Everybody from Murray City leave. I don't want him stealing anybody else.
Yeah, I think they've forgiven us by now, but probably not. She's really good. So is Josh, but we don't care about Sandy.
This is heating up this evening.
So anyways, so just a quick history lesson on Utopia. It was created by these 11 cities. You're one of those cities, founding member, and they started doing projects together. They were collectively bonded for those projects. And so those 11 cities are the founding and pledging members of Utopia. It was an 11-city project for probably 18 years-ish, and we've suddenly had a whole bunch of new city partnerships get involved. So they're not members, but we do have fiber projects going on in other cities, and I'll explain why and how that works. This is kind of where it covers. It's mostly that Wasatch Front. It's a little bit of a patchwork of cities that are part of the project. And then we do have some long haul routes that go down into St. George and Las Vegas. The history here, so we've got two phases. I picked the colors on purpose because we have the not so good phase and the very good phase. And so a lot of people hear about the not so good phase being phase one. There were some important good things that happened during that phase. Built the core of the network. It put a lot of the infrastructure in place that we would use in the future. It didn't make much money. It lost money. It didn't cover its costs like they'd hoped it would. And the cities, all of the cities have been paying against the bonds related to that phase. In 2009, there was a really difficult time. If you were involved with the city, you probably remember that very difficult time when they had to really decide whether to just walk away, cut their losses, and shut the thing down, or if they believed that this could be done in a way that was financially sustainable. They believed it was a critical service, and people who had the service really liked it, but financially it wasn't in good shape. So we did the cities did meet and decide that they wanted to try some additional project. We had done some small projects that were financially successful, but it was kind of a drop in the bucket compared to the original bonds. And those projects went really well. So there was some build in Brigham City and Tremonton. We built new network. We got customers. Those customers paid revenues. Those revenues more than covered the cost of those projects from a finance perspective. But like I said, it was small relative to the big. But they decided to use that model, and we've tweaked it and improved it over time. But we repeatedly took down new debt, built new projects, and those new projects have all been paying for themselves. So phase one, we talk about this $185 million of debt, and the cities are paying against those bonds. Lots of different phases and projects. With UIA, we've done over $170 million of projects at UIA, and all of those are being paid for by the revenues. So none of the UIA projects or phase two are being paid for or falling onto the cities. In fact, UIA even has financial upside that's being used to further the expansion of the system, and we're not coming back to the cities saying we need backstop or payments or anything like that. It used to be any time we'd show up at these meetings, you'd cringe because it was, oh no, what are they going to ask for this time? But what's nice is we're in a position to finish the build out of the network, including all the remaining areas of Murray, and we don't need any additional money or backstop or pledges or anything from the city to do that. I'll talk about what that looks like in just a minute. Just as a little recap on the structure of Utopia, we build infrastructure. We're not the internet provider, but this example here compares us to an airport. So like you'd put in an airport and have competing private sector airlines. Some of them do well, some of them fail. They price compete, they service compete. That's what we do with fiber. So we put the infrastructure in, and these different companies are now able to provide services to your city. And without that infrastructure, they would not be able to. You'd be stuck with just the typical incumbent options. This is what the marketplace looks like. You've got 11 different providers residentially. There's about 25 different providers on the business side of things. They compete, they change their prices. It's a very, very competitive environment. Other things though, it's not just about internet. We talk about what are the most important political topics in Utah. This is just what you'd come up with the Google list. Fiber doesn't solve all of these, but it helps with a lot of them. And so as we talk about things like air quality and the environment, there is a positive impact. I'll talk about that a little bit more. Transportation, obviously we can work remotely. We get more roads or more cars off the roads. We also provide connections for UDOT, so they can provide camera feeds and traffic control and those things. We partner with them on a lot of those projects. Education, obviously that's gotten very important as we see schools are pushing to have kids doing education from home. I mean, unfortunately, it's a bad situation we're in, but where you have fiber connectivity, that supports that very nicely. And even before this crisis, there's a lot of people moving towards online education, and so fiber helps with that. Government spending, we lower costs there, jobs and economy benefit, healthcare. There's a lot more telemedicine applications out there. It's really cool, and I can pull up an app on my phone and get a doctor visit and not have to go wait in line or something like that. There's a lot more of that coming as well. It benefits. I don't know how we help with gas prices. I don't know how we help with ethics. You know, can't solve everything with fiber, but there's a lot of good benefit. We build these networks. We build them with dedicated connections for every house and business. It's not shared. There's even other fiber networks. You say other fiber networks are fantastic, but they still share. They still slow down during peak hours. With Utopia, your neighbor can be the biggest bandwidth hog in the world, and they don't affect you because they're on their own fiber connection, and you have your own dedicated connection to your house. And we guarantee 24/7 you get the full speed and capacity of your connection. And that's our minimum speed's 250 meg. We also offer gig, and about half the customers pick gig and half pick 250 meg. And there's a small number that are actually picking our 10 gig offering, which is really cool. And we see more and more of those signing up. But that actually is the fastest speed you can get in the country. And so we have that available anywhere where we have our fiber network. It's not just like this neighborhood or something. Anywhere across Utopia, you can get the 10 gig option. We're a full generation ahead of anybody else. So smart city applications, I mentioned air quality monitoring is a really important application. That's just one of many things. You enable the city to do surveillance and traffic control and a lot of different things you can do as a city. We consider the city kind of the anchor user, and so anytime the city has a need, you know that you have that fiber available to you to support these applications. I could talk for hours on all of those, but I'll just point out that air quality one, since that is the top political topic now, probably secondary now to coronavirus. but go back a month and it was the top topic. And so this shows air quality monitoring stations that are out there. As you notice, Murray has more than these other cities. West Valley, Midvale, and Murray, you'll see kind of have a much better density. That's because we put in those air quality sensors at every one of our cabinets and huts. We don't charge the city to do that. We just do that as part of what we offer. And so you actually do have some of the best data that's made available to the public. The school systems often use it. They'll decide whether it's an indoor day or an outdoor day based on the live readings off of those air quality sensors. And from good data, we can make good decisions. And so as we talk about policy, incentives, enforcement, any of those types of things, the more data we have available, the better. And we've already been able to learn a lot from having this very granular data out there as far as impact of freeways, impact of canyons, impact of elevation, a lot of things like that. We can actually see all that data live and look at it historically. It's been very useful for, you know, data scientists, policy advisors, schools, and even those individuals who may have, you know, asthma or other conditions where they're very sensitive, can just benefit from that service that's out there. From our perspective, it's just a thing you plug into the fiber network. I mean, but if you didn't have that fiber network, the number one obstacle why these other cities don't have that sort of capabilities, because they don't have anything to plug it into. So they'd have to go buy connections from some third party, pay too much money for them, and it becomes a huge obstacle when you don't have that sort of connectivity. This is another one where you're not quite on the benches, but we have like a wildfire detection system using thermal cameras that are connected to the network to help with areas at high risk of wildfire. So anyways, back to Murray. So what do you have right now in Murray if you don't have Utopia Fiber available? These are just recent articles about the various lawsuits and problems that people have with the current providers that are here. I blacked out their names, but you could probably guess. But they're non-Utopia providers. We contrast that with the Utopia Fiber option. So this was one of the most recent posts I could find on your Murray Facebook group. It's a citizens group that's out there publicly, and so I apologize there's people's names on there, but it's just out there on the internet, on Facebook. And you'll see people ask, hey, what should I get? I just moved into the city, or looking for internet options. And you'll see that Utopia by far is the top rated, most recommended option. We have had third parties do net promoter surveys. We're the highest rated from a net promoter survey perspective, and that net promoter basically says, how likely are you to recommend this? And we get really top scores in that category for any broadband provider. We look at Google ratings. We're the top rated from a Google rating perspective. I have to point out that Google's on there too, and they're lower. But, you know, that's just bragging rights for us there. I have to point that out. So why do people like it? It's the fastest, but that's not everything. Also has to be good value, and so we provide good customer service and reliability. It's a good price, good speeds. It's kind of the combination of all those things that mean that this is what people like and want, and they stick with it. Demand skyrocketing. Every month it seems like we're setting a new record for people signing up, and so we've more than doubled the subscriber base across the system over the last few years. I mean, it's been dramatic growth. That includes then even in Murray. I'll show you the Murray specific stats in a minute. What are we working on? Our biggest project is the current phase of UIA. So UIA, the Utah Infrastructure Agency, is kind of phase 2. You're a member of both Utopia and UIA. And it is building rapidly across many areas of Utah and different cities. So primarily that expansion is focused on Orem, West Valley, Midvale, Murray. Those are the areas we have remaining to build out. Layton just got wrapped up. Woodland Hills was finished last year. Already has a 70% take rate. Morgan City was just wrapped up. Yeah, I got to update that slide. It says a third completed, but actually was just finished, and we're trending very well in that city. Payson City's second half was a separate bond they did, tied just to expediting their build out. Layton did the same thing. They're a member of Utopia, but they chose to do an additional separate pledge to expedite their project to get it built out a little quicker, and that is wrapped up. So we're done with that one and doing really well. And then that very last one is West Point's the most recent one we've done, and that's under construction right now. So we can't report back on take rates and revenues or anything there because it's being built.
Roger, you know, will you go back to that slide real quick?
Yep.
I look at those places, and I know several people that live there, and they're probably just thrilled because these are places that can't get a lot of service, and they're cut off and all these things. So I know Morgan, definitely, they're probably thrilled with
Yeah, they're doing really well there.
Cool.
They did really, I mean, we do well where we have CenturyLink and Comcast and the typical options, but where it's worse off, it's, you know, we get ridiculously high take rate. We do that to the benefit of the organization financially. We'll talk about what that means and why we do these things. But it's very, very good for Murray City when we do additional city projects. So let's go into some of the Murray details. So this is the availability of the network. So we have you can see that's about over 11,000 addresses in Murray that can currently get the service. That's business and residential addresses. We have a few thousand more to go. So approximately a third of the city still doesn't have it available. That is in our plan to finish up. I'll show that in a little bit. So, however, our number of subscribers has grown dramatically and steadily, despite us not really expanding a lot of the area in the city for a while. Our take rate is pretty good. We're up there at about 35% take rate residentially. That's a good, strong take rate, and it continues to grow. That's likely puts us in the #1 position in Murray. You know, if you take the other 65% of the addresses, a lot of those don't actually have homes on them, or they're various, this is based on parcels. And then you say if the cable company, the telephone company, and the wireless companies all get their shares, they're probably in the 10 to 15% range. This is a map that shows the coverage of the network in the city, so you can see which areas have service and which ones don't. If you wanted to see this and reference it, it's just on our website. You can go to cities and it's listed there. And you say, hey, I live in one of these little gray areas and I really want that service. When am I going to get it? That's the next slide. We do have a build out schedule for the rest of the city. Now, the comments at the top here are that this is what we share publicly is a very conservative schedule. We are ahead of schedule, and we anticipate staying ahead of schedule and getting this thing built out before this timeline. So we're actually targeting to try to get it all built out by the end of 2022. But the publicly shared schedule is a little bit later than that. We have some neighborhoods coming on as late as 2024. But again, we're trying to do better than that schedule and think we can. So I think things are going really well, except right now we're a little worried if cities aren't giving us permits and, you know, if they shut down or things like that. I mean, various things happen that help us and then sometimes hurt us, and so we're hoping to keep ahead of schedule on things. It hasn't been an issue in Murray though, so so far. Hopefully that's the case. We're here meeting, so that's a good sign. So other updates we have, there's the current UIA phase. That'll be done in summer 2021, and then we'll have another bond. Again, we won't need to come to the city for any sort of backstop or pledge or cost, and we'll do that financing on our own. And that will have basically the lion's share of what's remaining in Murray is in that bond. And then we have these other items to note. They're kind of smaller issues. There's this OpEx situation. There was a period of time when UIA was financed but couldn't use bond proceeds to pay its operating expenses. It had a shortfall and the cities were assessed. Murray made a payment towards that, a couple payments probably, but not all of the amount that was assessed. And so the cities that paid in full have gotten paid earlier, and then several cities hadn't paid in full. Those got paid on the tail end. So the schedule as it right now is this year you kind of get counted towards money that was billed but not paid. Same thing for 2021 fiscal year. And then in 2022, that amount that you did pay gets paid back to the city, and that's $221,000 in that fiscal year budget. That's according to our currently proposed plan. We have to get that approved by our board every year, but we don't really have any reason to believe that wouldn't be approved, based on our projections and where we're at. And then, as we continue to build these networks, I said UIA projects are financially sustainable and successful. Well, there's actually some financial upside that's being used to finish out the network. However, when we've built out the network and we're done, we're saying, well, now what? We believe, if we just say, hey, where do we think we'll be at, that we'll be able to start paying a portion of the Utopia bond obligations. I wish it was 100%. But we take an estimate and say, well, we're targeting between 20 and 30%. If we continue to get additional city partnerships, that would grow. And we continue to get higher take rates in the city, that would grow. Really, that's a target if we were kind of flat and just finished the build out and stayed status quo and didn't have city partnerships. That'd still be a lot better than where we're at right now, as the city's paying 100% of that debt obligation on the Utopia bonds. But certainly the more that is, the better. And so as we do these new city partnerships, those cities are guaranteeing those projects at a break-even scenario. However, as we exceed our take rate, there's an opportunity and a financial upside available to us in those cities. And so far, that's worked out pretty nicely for us. Those cities get a project built in their city at pretty low risk and relatively low cost. But we're not losing money on those projects. We guarantee that we're going to break even and even make money on them. So it's a pretty good win-win situation for these new city partnerships. And like I said, the goal of that is, and we'd like to see more cities benefit from this and benefit Utah as a whole. But there's also, a financial benefit to the organization in doing those. And, we want to pay every dollar of that debt we can. I mean, I know there's we hear about it. It's not just Murray. It's a lot of cities that are frustrated over the burden it is to your budget. And we feel that, and we know that. We didn't work here when that money was spent. We've inherited it just like many of you have. Come into a situation where this is it's a difficult line item on the budget every year. But we're here, we're your advocates. We work for you, and we are working to improve the financial situation. And we're making really good progress on it. And we're also making really good progress on the build out of the network, adding more and more customers, and even the reputation and demand for the service is all improved over the past. So we're pretty happy with things. Doesn't mean we don't have areas we can improve, but that's what we do and who we are, and that's about all I have. And open for any questions you have.
Does anyone have any questions?
Yes. So when I have a constituent come up to me and say, I have not been able, I hear about this Utopia, I've not been able to get it. I've tried, I've called them and have received no response. What do I tell them?
So I'd refer them to our website where they can see the map of where they are in the city, and as far as our plan, and they should have a date on there of when their area is expected to be available. There are occasions when the address mapping doesn't work properly, and they're like, well, I'm in a green area and I can't get it. Well, They just need to call us or reach out to us online or however is easiest for them. We have a lot of different ways to get a hold of us. And then we can verify and see if there's a way for us to make that work. But there's been a few of them where someone will post and like, hey, I'm so frustrated I can't get this thing and my neighbor has it. And I'm like, well, what do you mean your neighbor has it and you can't get it? And then we go look and, there was some obstacle. Maybe there was a pole attachment. I mean, there are real obstacles we run into where it literally stops right here in the middle of a neighborhood, right at this location, because we can't get a permit from some third party for a pole attachment. The cities are really, really good about those, but sometimes those are CenturyLink poles. They're less than excited to let us use those poles, but they do have to allow us to, and so we have to work through that process and get that. That's a common obstacle we've had in Murray to get through areas. But yeah, I would just say refer them to us to check in with it, and then we can give them the date of when it's expected to be available to them. But that isn't available on the website too if they want to find it themselves.
Okay, so you will respond to them, because that's also been a complaint that they've tried to get a hold of you and there's been no response, or asked people to come out and they have not. So have you turned over a new leaf that
Yeah, I mean,
have you changed?
I hate to hear that. We try really hard to be responsive to everything, and I know on social media it's tracked. Like, it's actually, here's every single, if somebody reaches out on Facebook, we make sure every single one of those is responded to. If somebody posts a review, every single one of those is responded to. But if it's just an email, I'm not sure. I personally don't have visibility into each one of those emails that comes in. We do create a ticket and it's supposed to be followed through. But if you have one where someone says, I called them, I emailed, I didn't get a response, go ahead and let me know. I would like to know if that's, hopefully it's a one-off or something, but if it's a widespread problem, we certainly want to fix that and
Okay,
make sure people are getting responses.
great. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Any question?
Do you have something?
I'll go after you.
I was just going to say, as someone living in the gray, I'm very excited about what feels like an increasingly short time span on getting it for all of Murray, because I know that's been a frustration for some of us on the west side of the river, watching it come our way. And thank you for sharing about the purple air sensors. I didn't realize that Utopia was a part of why we had so many here in Murray.
Yeah, we provide more purple air sensors than anyone else. Like, we're the
Yeah.
number one provider of sensor data.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of those, so that was just
Cool.
nice to hear. But go ahead.
Yeah, if you click on them, it'll say powered by Utopia Fiber, so you can tell exactly which ones we're providing.
I'll have to go check it out.
Cool. Okay, first of all, you've been the executive director for about,
Just over 4 years.
Yeah.
And I've been with Utopia for a lot longer than
I knew
that.
you were with him. Did you leave for a little bit and then come back? That's right. Well, I'm just going to tell you, it's been wonderful. The transparency has been totally different from when I came on board. Absolutely, totally. And so that's a huge compliment to Utopia and your new staff
A
that's
really good team
come
right
on
now.
with you. Just a question. So I noticed that Murray's last on the list for the build out, and I was just curious to know that and we got non-member cities, and we're a member city, and we got non-member cities that are being built out before us. Just curious why that would be.
Yeah, we get asked that a lot. So it's a financing and a timing issue. Like, if I could get the financing for finishing out Murray today, I would do it. We don't, and so we time the build out with the revenue growth so that we can go to the bond market and finance new phases. And so we basically said we have excess construction capacity to do more, but we don't have excess financing capacity. So we have basically a schedule based on our ability to get the debt and the amounts and the timing of that debt. And so then you say, well, what about Layton and Payson?
Right.
Well, that's what changed for them. They said, well, what if we came to the table and said, we will backstop a separate bond, almost as if it was the city's own bond. I mean, it was pledged dollar for dollar by those cities. And if we do that, will we get moved to the top of the list? And the answer was yes. And it could still be for Murray if you wanted to move up.
So we, and this is not a negative thing, but we're being penalized for we're paying our bond.
Yeah, it's
But
not
we're
a
being penalized?
penalty.
Okay.
You're in the same position as West Valley. They're being built at.
Okay, so it's
they're
not a
gonna be
penalty
done.
because we didn't add more money when you came back in the day and asked for some operational
No,
expense?
I mean, if you say if there's any penalty related to that, it's just the timing of the OpEx.
Okay.
It's like, well, you
Okay.
didn't pay that. And there was a time when we're like, we really need you to pay that to come
Right.
back in good standing. And we're
Right,
like,
that's not,
at this point, we don't
Okay.
care. Like,
okay,
we consider all cities in good standing. And right now, it's just, it's like, where do we have financing priority and timing and resource availability? And so, the option is still out there. I don't know what the cost of finishing out Murray is, but I don't know, say it's something like $8 million or something like that. If Murray said, hey, we want to backstop a separate bond for $8 million and pledge some revenue, it'd be a 25-year commitment and all of that, that would then enable the funds for that immediately, and then we could take on that project sooner. The general appetite has been, well, it's coming, and if we can get this without any backstop or pledge, maybe we'll just wait it out.
right.
That's your
What is it,
choice.
2023, I think you said, the final?
2024.
Well, our goal, we really do believe that we can finish this thing out by 2022, the end of
Oh,
2022.
okay. I'll
So-
tell you that I used, when I started back in the day, it was horrific and all these things happening, and I'm not getting those. I'm getting more of, like Diane says, I'd like to, they're positive, but I'd like to have utopia. So I'm hearing a lot more than that, so that's a good sign, so.
And just to be clear on the schedules, I mean, the public website shows as late as second quarter 2024. That's kind of our
Right.
worst case scenario.
Sure.
But we believe
You're
we can do
hoping
better
for
than
that.
that. And as we get closer,
Great.
we can actually update the schedule online.
Great. Thanks, Roger.
Just a clarification. So if we were to put more funding into it, then we could move it up. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I mean, we need to sit down and say, well, this is the amount and this is the terms and all that other stuff. But yes, you would take priority over these additional city projects. You're a member of Utopia, and if you are backstopping a bond to get the remaining areas built out, you get to jump to the top of the line. And that's what we did with Payson. And I'd say they were in bad standing. I mean, they turned it around. I mean, they paid their OpEx assessments. They said, hey, what can we do? Can we backstop a bond? And they did, and now they're under construction, and they'll get built out pretty soon. And the same thing is available to Murray. And
Okay.
we'd have to go check on the amount.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, it's not necessarily more funding, it's if you pledged revenue. So in those cities that we have built, they've pledged revenue, but they haven't had to contribute anything. And we expect take rates to be such that we will never have to call upon their pledges. So it would require a pledge of revenue, not actual hard revenue.
And these are from member cities.
Excuse me.
Could you repeat
Hello?
that?
Yeah, I don't
So we could have that on the record?
Yeah, so I'm going to make up a number so we have something to work with. So let's say it's an $8 million project to finish out the city. We basically come out and say, I need a pledge, a revenue pledge for 25 years, a couple years of capitalized interest in there. So actually the agreement be like 27 years. And you'd have to identify some sort of revenue you have. You say it might be sales tax revenue or franchise revenue or something, and say, I'm going to pledge that revenue. We don't expect you to actually spend any money out of that. You still have the money to spend on other projects, but you wouldn't be able to finance anything based on that revenue. That would be tied up into this project. So then as soon as we sign that agreement, we go run with the financing. We actually take down the debt. We just have an agreement from you as a pledge agreement. We go take down the debt, we build the network, we go get customers, and you say, well, is there any risk to the city? Yes, there is a condition. It basically says that the revenue, we have to be able to get sufficient revenue from that new incremental project to cover the debt service on that project. And if we don't, then you actually would be on the hook to pay the shortfall. Now, we're way over exceeding on those incremental projects in Layton and Payson and these other projects. And as we look at it, it's like we probably come out at about a 30% take rate that we'd need to get in all of those new areas for the thing to break even. Well, we're already 35% in all the existing areas, so we don't really have any doubt that we'd be able to achieve a 30% take rate on the new areas. But you do have the obligation over a long period of time. Like I said, it's a 27-year agreement. So it adds a little bit of risk to the city, but it's pretty low risk, but bumps you up a couple years.
Okay, Rosalva, do you have a question?
Yeah, I do. Can you pull up the slide where it compared the amounts from each city?
This is the
I'm just
closest one I
curious
can think
to
of.
see what other cities are also paying out. The biggest complaint that I've received is that we are paying way too much already as it is for each member, each citizen for Utopia.
So
And I'm just curious to see where we're at financially. Where Murray, you were on the right slide.
oh, okay. So on the Utopia debt obligations, those are all relative to your population at the time of the bond. So you're not paying more per capita than other cities. You're really at the same level. And population has changed a little bit here and there, but generally you're paying an equivalent amount of money as any other city when you size it to your city. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Can you go back to the other slide with the cities?
There it is.
This one?
Sorry, yeah, that one. So currently, this is where they're at with their bonds, correct?
No, these are after Utopia projects. So Utopia has the $185 million of bonds spread across all of the member cities. And then since then, we've done these UIA projects, the current phase being a $45 million phase. That's that top project. And then Layton said, hey, we don't want to wait around for the second half of our city. So they backstopped a city-specific bond for $23 million. So their whole city project was about twice that. They would have been a $46 million project on its own, but half of that was done in UIA previously, and then the city did its own additional pledge above and beyond the Utopia and the UIA pledges. So they got like kind of 3 rounds. And that's what the $23 million came from. It's not being financed from our normal revenue stream like UIA projects are. It's a Layton specific one. And so
Okay.
that's available to expedite, and that's what it was for in Layton. It was to expedite their build out. Same thing in Payson City. That $3.5 million was to expedite their build out. But they
Would you say that
more
the-
obligation than other cities like Murray.
Okay. Would you say at the start of this project, the cost was more than anticipated, and that's where we kind of came into the situation that we're in now, that not all our residents have fiber?
I don't think the costs were underestimated. I mean, some of the initial feasibility studies planned on it being about a $500 million project to build out all of the Utopia cities and throughout. We're not far from that. I don't think we'll get all the way up to that amount. We've got the 185, and then we have 170 million at UIA, but some of those are even new cities. And then we've got another 90 million that we've got, with this 45 million current phase and another 45 coming. Yeah, we'll be short of the original estimate on the cost. I think the miss on the first phase of the project was more on revenues. The revenues and take rates were not there like they had hoped for. Fortunately, that's
Okay.
changed. I mean, the take rates, subscription rates, revenues have all really gone well over the last 4 or 5 years.
Okay, thank you.
Let me ask one more question. Stay on that one, Roger, real quick. So just so we know, so Layton is a member city, so they've, like you said, they're in their 3rd round, and Payson. But West Point, Morgan, Woodlands, these cities are not member cities, so they're not obligated to any of the bonds of Utopia or UI. Help me out. How come I can't say it?
Utopia or
UIA,
UIA.
thank you, UIA. And so they're just into it, those amounts, without being part of the member cities with those debts.
Yeah, that's
the
true.
bond debt. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's kind of a mutually beneficial arrangement. I mean, their benefit is, we had a lot of conversations about if you want to do a project, you need to buy in, and it was like, that's not going to work out. They're not ever going to agree to that. But at the same time, we could let them come in and take on all the risk and essentially guarantee ourselves a financial benefit in those partnerships. So they don't get to vote. They don't get membership on the board. And as we have opportunities for financial upside and paying old debts, they don't have any claim to any of that. So there is a benefit to having these new city partnerships. They don't get that level of control and ownership that you have. But we do, it is good for us financially. From a long-term perspective, they may have preferred to have been in the original member of the city, but right now it's a painful.
If they want to, we'll switch them if they're interested. I'm just kidding.
Okay, thank you. Do I understand right, if these non-member cities function well, part of that revenue will help pay off our bond?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
No, thank you. We appreciate you guys.
Thank you for your time. Excellent presentation. All right, wastewater planning program report. Corey Wells.
Does that have an HDMI on? No, it's just the USB-C adapter. Can't remember that many digits.
Okay. All right, we'll appreciate the time tonight to present our 2019 municipal wastewater planning program. This is required by the Division of Water Quality annually to present information from the previous year. So they've set up a predetermined questions that we answer, and then we have to turn this in on the 15th. It's submitted back to them, and then we wait for approval from the council. But Ben Ford here is our wastewater superintendent, and he's going to go through this report, and then we'll answer any questions after.
Okay, thank you. So, as Corey said, we're required to submit this to Division of Water Quality on a yearly basis. Has to be approved by the council. So some of these questions are kind of redundant. There's some good information in here. There's some not so good information that's doesn't do a whole lot for us. So we'll go through all of it. If you have any questions, yeah, don't hesitate to ask. And if some of it I may skip over that isn't super pertinent. So basically, the big thing on this first page, we're a grade 3 system. All of our operators, we have 7 qualified operators with a grade 4 certification to run our system. That's really the only pertinent thing on this page here. So the general questions going through here, Corey's the one who filled out this form right here. So for the year right here, $439.80 is the total sewer charge, the average sewer charge that every resident paid, and that breaks out to $36.65 a month. That's kind of the pressing thing here. So all of these questions is basically asking if our anticipated revenue is enough to cover our services for the year. Answered yes on all of those. The next question, operating and reserves. We do not use property taxes to cover any of the system. So the next section is revenue enough to, projected revenue enough to cover for the next 5 years? Yes. Do we have a sufficient staff to cover all of our needs, operation, maintenance needs for the next 5 years and coming years after that? And is sufficient funding there, which it all is. So we answered yes to all those questions. And do we have sufficient revenue to cover the capital projects that will be upcoming? And that is a yes as well. So again, do we have funding for the next 5 years? Yes, we do. The next 10 years, We answered yes on that. 20 years, we put a no. These are all projections based on what capital projects we can see coming up. 20 years is just anticipated cost of construction, too far to foresee into the future that far. That's why we answered a no right there. So our impact fees are $13.72. We collect those. We answered yes to those questions. We have done a rate study within the last 5 years. So right now, our impact fee is the $13.72, and our current base rate is $8.82, with a flow rate charge of $2.62 after that. And that will change again November 1st is when that will adjust again. But that's what we currently are until that period. So yes, we have the impact fee study. Have we updated our capital facility plan within the last 5 years? Answered yes to that. We maintain a plan of operations with our management plan and our standard operating procedures. We answered yes to that question. Do we have an asset management system? So we use GIS, CityWorks, all of our accounting software, multiple things to track all of our assets within the sewer division. So this next question here, do you know the total replacement cost of your sewer system capital assets? So that's a rather large number. When we initially filled this out and submitted this, we were looking for some clarification on this question. We didn't get it before the time we submitted it, so we will be resubmitting with a new number. So the actual number is $6,835,000, and that was totaled up basically with all of our capital purchases, is where that number comes from. This larger number we misinterpreted and based that off of total footage within our system. We have 132 miles in our system, as well as the amount of manholes. So we put a number to both those to calculate the total cost if we had to do a full replacement of our system. So as you can see, it's a pretty drastic difference in that number. Next, so the annual treatment costs as a percentage, we answered yes to that. We have adequate funding going to Central Valley. So the cost of the capital improvement projects projected for the next 20 years. So through 2024, the reason that's so large is we have a significant amount of money allocated for Central Valley improvement treatment plant improvements over the next several years. That's why that's a larger number than after that. It kind of drops off, and we're back to a lesser amount that's going to be owed to Central Valley, and based more just off of capital projects moving forward from that point. Okay, our system description. Our largest diameter pipe is 48 inches. That's where it leaves the city and heads towards Central Valley's treatment plant to our metering station. That's right at 5th West and 45th South. Our average depth is 8 feet. Like I stated before, we have 132 miles in the total collection system, and 132 miles and about 2,400 manholes total through our whole system. We operate three different lift stations, all of variable sizes. They handle different types of flow. With the Peak, our biggest lift station now, since we got rid of our Riverside lift station, is our Fairborn lift station, and the peak flow on that is about 1,100 gallons a minute. That's what it's designed for. So that's the peak, but the average flow is closer to about 500-600 gallons a minute. Collection system was constructed in 1917. The largest diameter pipe is 1972. That's a 48-inch pipe, like I stated before, that's going to Central Valley. And then this next part, discharges. So how many days last year was there an overflow or basement flooding due to rain or snow melt? That's 0. How many days was there a bypass overflow due to equipment failure? That is 0 as well. So we have 2 different types of overflows that we classify. A class 1 is affects 5 or more private structures, commercial building, gets into a water of the state. So that's a class 1 is a significant sanitary sewer overflow. So we haven't had any of those this year, which is a good thing. We account that to having the right equipment and tools to do our job properly and maintain the system the right way. So that's a class 1 SSO. A class 2 basically is a lateral backup, a basement backup. So laterals are the homeowner's responsibilities, but we still track all of those to the best of our ability when we get notified of them. And we haven't had any responses for that over the past year. So the third section, we have new development. This question, is there any loadings or flow that would increase it by 10% or more? No. Any new development in 2 to 3 years that will increase the BOD, which is the biochemical oxygen demand, to the system of 25% or more, and we do not project any of that as well. No new commercial connections through the year. We have 109 new residential connections, and most of that is due to our Wynwood subdivision, Murray Cove, Hamlet Homes, our few new subdivisions we have going in. And we have 8 full-time employees, and the service area is approximately 36,800. So this page right here just lists our DRC certified operators for the system. So out of the 8 full-time employees, I'm the chief DRC operator, and we have 7 other employees who are listed as DRC and are grade 4 certified, which is 1 step above what the city requires. And then we have 2 other employees who currently have a grade 1 certification. So this next page just kind of goes over facility maintenance, looking forward. Do we have a preventive maintenance program for your system? Yes, we do. That's our sanitary sewer management plan. That's been updated. Do you have a written emergency response plan? That's included with our management plan on our SOPs. Yes, answer is yes to all these. Is the entire system inspected at least every 5 years? Yes, it is. And we have pretty close to 100% of our system mapped into place. Anytime we see something out of place, we go and correct it with our GIS and keep that up to date. So we do have a sanitary sewer management plan. It has been adopted by the council, and that was back in 2015. Every year we do an audit on the management plan. And on this year's audit, generally the main thing, SOPs get updated every year. SOPs are a living document, so if we find a better way to perform our job, we'll keep those updated. Next section, the CCAP. We do have a CCAP as defined by the management program in place, and that's included. That's also part of our management plan and master plan. So this next session just kind of gives a description of our collection system. We're aware of where our trouble spot areas are. We maintain those. We have those on list to be, whatever can be fixed is on list to be repaired going forward in the future. And what can't be just has to be maintained. We have it on at a minimum a weekly, some of them are monthly checklists that we go out and operate and clean and maintain at that point. So next question, our main issue outside of our trouble spot areas that we know of is root intrusion and manhole lid failures. Root intrusion, we have a contract with Duke's Roots. They come in and they treat about 10,000 feet, 8 to 10,000 feet a year. Root intrusion and grease are the big things that can cause SSOs. So we make sure we have plenty of money allocated to go towards that every year, and they do a good job with that. There's a good warranty that comes with that as well. So next, does the district pay for CEUs? Yes, we pay for all CEUs for our employees. We do not have a written plan in place. It's just kind of a given that we pay for all classes for them to maintain their certifications. And that is really it. Does anybody have any questions?
Pretty impressive.
Interesting stuff, I know.
That was informative. Thank you.
Okay,
Yeah,
thanks.
thanks. Looks like we're in good shape.
Yeah, I think we are. We're doing
Appreciate
good.
that.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks, Corey
Thank you.
and Ben.
Okay,
Thank you.
Next, residential neighborhood business text amendment, Melinda.
Actually going to let Jared take this.
It was decided that I'm not qualified to run the PowerPoint.
You're in
Known
good
to-
company,
been
but
known to fall down on those a lot. So while she's getting that set up, I was just going to kind of update you really quickly on the residential neighborhood business zone, because this text amendment is specific to that zone. So once again, it doesn't apply to any other zones in the city. It's specific to RNB. That RNB zone was developed by the city a number of years ago as a specific buffer for where we have large residential areas that are adjacent to high traffic corridors like Winchester Street. The two streets we think of most often are Winchester Street and 9th East, because those are where we principally applied it. So when we looked at this particular text amendment, we weren't just looking at the one zone, but we were also kind of de facto looking at these two areas along Winchester that you can see there and 9th East. That's where the great majority of our RNB zoning will take place. And I say that because all of those properties that you see in the red boxes in the pink, this is a section of our future land use map. So those are the areas where we've said as a city, as property owners come to us and decide they want to ask to rezone to RNB, we'll try to support those rezonings where we can. Not all of those properties have been rezoned to RNB. Lots of them have, but not all of them. Recently, the applicant for this text amendment, Brad Reynolds Construction, did successfully rezone a section of that property. It's kind of right in the middle of the box in the middle, just above where it says affected areas there. You probably remember that rezoning. It wasn't that long ago. Took some area that was zoned R18 and rezoned it to RNB. Brad Reynolds' plan for that area dealt with some of the allowable uses in the RNB zone. Could you go to the next slide right there? So in the RNB zone, we already allow lots of kind of light-duty commercial business ventures, offices, and things like that, things that are designed to kind of empty out after 5 o'clock and not be a problem for the neighborhood. And we do allow actually single-family homes under certain conditions, and then duplexes are already allowed. What Brad Reynolds Construction has asked for in this text amendment is for us to include not just the duplexes that are already part of it, but also twin homes. It's a slightly different land use category, but because we have that category and it's not listed, they're not allowed. Now, the question really became, what's the difference between a duplex and a twin home? And there is one, and it's kind of best illustrated by these slides. So a duplex is a single lot, and under our zoning, you have to have 10,000 square feet for that lot. And on that 10,000 square foot lot, you can have a duplex building. So you have two units put together. Two different people can live in those, two different families can live in each side, but one person has to own that lot. You can only buy that lot. In a twin home, it's exactly the same way. It's set up exactly the same way, but there is a property line running through the middle of that building. So you have, in essence, two 5,000 square foot lots and a building that's stuck together at the middle at those lot lines. So what we did in this text amendment was propose that we would create the same situation, the same impact as a duplex, but allow it to be owned individually as two twin homes. So you have the same impact socially, you have the same impact physically for the lot, but you're basically two different families can own each side, and that allows Brad Reynolds Construction or whoever else in that case to sell both sides. That allows them to put a little bit more investment into the property because their odds of being able to sell in this market to individual buyers versus an investor are pretty good. So we created a possibility with this text amendment rather than more than anything else. Can you go to the next slide, Melinda?
so the real difference is owner occupy or
Correct.
renters.
There really is. The way that we've written it, it could be different than that, but the way that we've written this particular text amendment, that would be the result. And it would only apply to this RNB zoning. So there aren't a whole lot of places where this could happen again, but we asked ourselves as a staff and as a planning commission when we looked at this, are we likely to have any kind of negative impacts from allowing that difference, from allowing two twin homes on two 5,000 square foot lots packed together exactly that way, or two dwellings in a duplex on a 10,000 square foot lot? There's essentially no difference except owner occupancy, yes. So if that happens in this case for Brad Reynolds land, we're okay with that as a planning commission, as a staff. And also if it happens once or twice in a few more instances, we're good with that too. We felt strongly about it as staff that it was a good move, and planning commission responded positively as well. I think the next slide was the planning commission's review of it. It was 4-0 with that recommendation positively to the city council. We only had 4 commissioners that night. Several of the others actually did call in and talk about it, ask questions first. And that was the single most common question. Make sure I'm understanding the difference between a duplex and a twin home, because people generally see them very much the same. They are distinct. They were all in support as well. So
Did you say that there's not other places in the city where we allow that?
there are other places in the city where we would allow twin homes.
Right.
But in the RNB, we wanted to make it, we didn't allow it in the RNB.
So it was specific to this zone that we haven't allowed it, but in other zones?
In other zones, we would. You could do it in different ways. You could do it with a planned unit development. It brings whole different kinds of things into the mix.
Okay.
So, but this would be specific to the RNB, yes,
Okay.
exactly. Good question. So we are recommending approval, so did the Planning Commission, with that language tied to it to make sure that the impact is exactly the same other than the owner occupancy. Any questions for staff at this point?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks.
Okay, and last, emergency remote participation of council meetings, GL.
As we all know, this coronavirus or COVID-19 is in the news frequently. And the issue came up as to two things. One was the emergency declaration by the mayor and its possible extension, and then remote participation by the council with going forward with these meetings. As you know, the mayor declared a local emergency March 13th, which would have been about 4 days ago. Under state law, that declaration lasts for 30 days, but it can be continued by the city council. And given the fact that looking at the calendar, the next council meeting would be April 7th, which would be, roughly 4 or 5 days before the 30-day expiration. We thought it wise to bring this to the council tonight for your consideration as to whether to extend or continue the declaration of emergency. In addition to that, as I said earlier, the question has arisen about the council meeting remotely for these meetings. Under state law and under our city ordinance right now, there's a requirement that a quorum be present at an anchor location before you can do anything electronic. So tonight, for example, there are 4 of you here. That's clearly a quorum, and Councilwoman Dominguez is on the phone electronically. So that's how the ordinance is right now. Going forward, what this resolution would do would, at least for the time being, while this emergency is in existence, this would allow you to meet separately and remotely and not have a quorum in the same place, or the public for that matter. So as you think about that tonight, those are the issues, whether to continue the local declaration of emergency and whether to be able to meet remotely. Any questions?
I just read through it, and it seemed pretty specific that it would have to be an emergency and not just off the cuff on certain things, which was good.
It would be this emergency that we're talking about,
Right.
yeah.
All right.
You're right.
Is it one resolution for both to continue?
It is.
Is there a reason that it wouldn't be a separate vote in the 3 weeks when we would have another meeting scheduled rather than extending it from there?
Say that again.
Sorry, coughing topically. So there's the one to allow us to vote electronically, and then to extend the state of emergency for Murray City. Is there a reason it's tied into one rather than two individual?
Because the subject matter is this emergency. You could, if you wanted to separate that, we could separate out for 2 separate resolutions. That'd be fine too. But the idea was that this would only apply to this local emergency that we're going through right now.
But it also extends the 30-day.
It does.
Rather than voting, and I mean, I'm not super optimistic that it'll be over in a month anyway. But if it were and we had extended it, are there any implications of that? Or are there any?
No, you would then
to vote
at
to
your next
undo
meeting.
it?
Yes, you would.
Okay.
You would. They call that proclaiming it terminated.
Oh. Okay.
You'll have to do that anyway, no matter when it ends.
So whenever it ends.
Yes.
Even if it was at the end of the 30 days that the mayor had the authority to say that we would still have to proclaim that it was over.
That's correct.
Even if it expired.
Yes.
Oh, okay. I've never done this before. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Very
Hey,
interesting.
neither we.
Right? Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, GL. Are there any announcements, Jan?
I have a few things I was just going to review. Most of them you've probably heard about already. we did receive an email today, I'm sure most of you did too, that attended the National League of Cities, that 2 attendees at the Congressional City Conference tested positive for the COVID-19 virus. So they're currently recovering at home and feeling better, and that's the only news they shared about that. However, as you know, there are many, many events that have canceled through the rest of March and into April. One thing that we're questioning right now, and maybe Kat, while you and Rosalba are both here, you could make a decision as to whether or not you would like to have our small nuclear reactor meeting on Thursday morning. I know Kat expressed to me she'd really like to have that if at all, Rosalba, you feel like you could call in.
And Blaine's not here right now to ask his thoughts on that, but
thank you.
I will let you know tomorrow. Not to kind of go into too much information now publicly, I will text you about this later.
Okay. Okay.
and that's fine as other things seem to be stretching out as well. We've
Okay.
got time to reschedule that if needed.
All right, we'll talk about it tomorrow. And then also I wanted to remind you that Friday's meet and greet that was scheduled by the Chamber of Commerce has canceled. And one meeting that is being held is Wolford. I've been in touch with Pam Roberts, and they'll hold the meeting in their location or on the web or by telephone, if you like, or online. She'll send the instructions for that.
Yeah. I'm surprised.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Really surprising. Yeah, I'll be on the
New
phone.
Scale tours have been rescheduled, and all of you have put in your requests for that. And then I was just notified late this afternoon that the ULCT mid-year conference, April 22nd through 24th, has canceled as well. So that's most everything. Any questions?
No, thank you, Jan.
Thank you, Jan. And with that, we will adjourn the meeting.